Hello and welcome to Move the Line, presented by 4for4 Bets. I am Ryan Noonan here for our last NFL draft show of the season. Connor Allen, Scott Smith, Vegas Refund, just here to suss through whatever we can make ups and downs. I started smoking last night. It got that stressful. Figured at this point, good time to pick up some new hobbies. Information coming in. What's information? What's noise? What's reporting, what's speculation. And that's what we're here for today in our final hour to try to suss through some of this stuff here. Connor Allen, what's going on, buddy?
Yeah, just some of the craziest rumors in the last 12 hours. And some of them might be right, some of them might be wrong. I don't know. I think it's an interesting time, and I'm excited to break down some of them because I think I'm certainly not buying a lot of the late steam that we're hearing.
We're going to kind of comb through rumors and questions today. So if you are hanging out with us in the chat, throw them in there. We will circle back and make time or bounce around to your questions, whatever you want here. Let us know what you're looking at. Let us know what your questions are. Steam that you may have heard, anything like that. We'll jump around there to Scott Smith, repping the purple and gold LSU today. What's going on, buddy?
There we go. That side. Oh, look, it's grind time. Last a little bit of craziness that's coming out, trying to search through some of that. And so this is actually a time when legitimate information starts coming out. There's a lot of smoke screens that lead, and then you start to kind of be able to see through some of the smoke and see some of the real stuff come out. Still waiting on some of the bigger guys' mock drafts to come out and see where they're leaning in a sense. But I think there's some good stuff to go ahead and source through today.
Yeah, VR. I heard someone today say now is the time to shut out everything, and I couldn't agree less with that statement. I think now is the time to really be plugged in because we start to get even more actual information from perfect sources at times. So, how we doing today, bud?
Yeah, I mean, I'm I think I pay attention to this stuff that really isn't involving the really early picks, to an extent, or quarterbacks, I guess you could say. I'm kind of just with the quarterback stuff, I'm blocking out. Don't really have many shares, if any, on any of them. But when we're talking non-quarterback rumors, that's the stuff I'm definitely paying attention to.
Yeah, we're
Shout
gonna
out
get through
to the Chargers.
We'll get through all of that today. So yeah, keep the questions flying in. I want to remind folks, if you want to get all the official plays from the four of us here, you want to get into the Discord at 4for4. To do that, you need our betting subscription, 4for4.com/plans. Use the promo code VR. That is going to get you a sizable discount to get you in, gets you access to everything that we do at 4for4 for this upcoming NFL season. We'll also get you all of the VR's picks for not just the NFL draft, NBA's coming up, NHL, wherever else we're doing here, MLB. You get all of VR stuff there too. So you got to use that promo code. Go to the promo code or the plans page, use that promo code VR and get in there. All right, for the final time, Scott, draft starts at 2, bud. What are we doing with the Commanders and all the quarterback news? And you can take the quarterback stuff any way you want. Commanders, Pats, trade up, whatever you want to do here, bud.
So I've been asked a few times over the last 24 hours, where do I stand on Washington at 2? I think based on all the information that I've gotten, that it's going to be Jayden Daniels. I think for multiple reasons, Washington's not the first for Daniels in his camp. They have very strong feelings that if he goes to Minnesota by some chance, that he could be Rookie of the Year. And I think Minnesota's a good spot for any quarterback that lands there. But I think sourcing through everything through the last few weeks, the rumors have been true where Washington's not necessarily his top choice, but I think when it's all said and done, that's where he's going to go. Some of the other information that I got, Colin Cowherd has been adamant that it's going to be Jayden Daniels throughout the process, and his source supposedly is coming directly from Cliff Kingsbury. Some other outside sources through some player evaluation people are also saying that it's going to be Jayden Daniels. And so without Washington officially saying it's Jayden Daniels, I feel about as comfortable as I possibly can from the other sources saying it's going to be Jayden Daniels at 2.
Where we stand with that, VR? Any thoughts on how to attack this, or it's just kind of too late because we've kind of moved through a spot where it's minus 400, minus 600 in some spots for Jayden Daniels to be number 2 overall?
Yeah, I think the only way to attack it at this point, I think it's pretty much in pen too. is you can parlay the number 2 pick on FanDuel, like FanDuel number 2 pick with whatever, like 4 top 10 guys, like a Dunze, whoever it is, would probably be your best way to attack it. And if you don't have FanDuel or you're just not into the parlays, I would just sit it out at this point, unless you just want to lay crazy juice. And I feel like every time I lay crazy juice, something bad happens. So,
Connor, how does that affect like the next couple picks too? What are we doing here in terms of exactas, New England at 3, or anything you want to talk about with the Commanders here too?
Yeah, if the Commanders take Daniels at 2, and then we're looking at pick 3, they're, I think what we've heard for the last few weeks is that the Patriots really like Drake May. And that was like pretty consistent for a long time. And I wasn't sure if it was on their board, Jaden then May, or just May no matter what, but that's been pretty steady. And then today we got some rumors pretty publicly from, I think it was Dane Brugler tweeted it out, and then some other people have said that they're heavily considering JJ McCarthy at pick 3. And a lot of this came from the rumors stemming from the owners like meddling with basically everything, like the owners sitting in. And we saw last year that happened with the Texans a little bit, or with the Panthers, and like it's really just something that kind of throws everything for a curveball here. So for me, like the exactas are tough because I really do think it's a little bit more up in the air than what people are suggesting right now. And if May goes 3, like I think JJ could easily go 4 or 5, probably 5 to be honest at this point, maybe even further. Like, I mean, some people have suggested he might slide. I think that it'll still be the 5th overall. But then if JJ McCarthy goes 3, I think that we see some teams like aggressively trying to move into 4 and probably meet Arizona's demands of trading up. So I think there's like a lot of alternatives to the way this top 5 can shake out depending on who goes 3.
So talk to me about that real quick, because with May off the board at 3, McCarthy the lone top quarterback left, you don't think that there's a team that really wants to move up to solidify locking him up, and the Cardinals are kind of off the board? Or you just think like, because what's the difference? If you think it's going to be 5, like why wouldn't the Cardinals still be in play?
The Cardinals price tag is higher than the Chargers price tag, from my understanding. I think the Chargers are more motivated to move down than, like I said, especially significantly into the 10, 11, 12 range than the Cardinals, who by all accounts view Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. pretty similarly, and would say it's 6. So I think that there's just a different price tag involved and level of motivation.
Cardinals would almost have to make 2 moves basically to stay in the range to be able to lock up
that
wide receiver. Yeah, they could. They did it last year, right? We know that video has been going around. That's obviously the popular one, and speak to that. All right, let's talk about the rumor of the day, I guess. VR. We've had a lot of J.C. Latham smoke. Whether you want to, first non-quarterback off the board, first offensive lineman off the board, the target of the Chargers. Does that mean Latham at 5? Does that mean positioning yourself to trade back? What do we make ups and downs of Latham, and how do we kind of attack into the market right now?
I mean, Kuiper was on Latham to the Chargers, I want to say like back in January, and he stuck to it for a while until he came off. And last couple of days, there's been like dot connecting with the Chargers and Latham. And I mean, there was like a bunch of Twitter photos of the pro days with the Chargers offensive lineman like paying a lot of attention to him. But I think it's been assumed that Latham would be 11. Like they trade back, they take Latham at 11, which I think is still the most realistic option. But now it's coming out to the extent that, I mean, Breer just had his rumor piece that he puts out every couple days or every other day. And the biggest thing I took from it was he was connecting Latham to the Chargers. Wouldn't be crazy for them just to stick at 5 and take Latham at 5. And then after that, he said if he doesn't go to 5, he sees Latham going 7 to the Titans, which would assume Alt would go 5. So offensive line is definitely becoming extremely strong for the Chargers. And with all this like smoke or whatever it is with kind of JJ maybe falling or like a trade not happening at 4 or 5, I think whether it's like exactas or anything, whether it's Alt or Latham, I think that is at 5 becoming more and more realistic.
crush a lot of pretty fun exactas. That was
I mean, I
kind
went.
of,
I was not responsible yesterday with the exactas, which a lot of them were. It was like Cardinals and Neighbors, and then I mean I've had a bunch of Latham 5 and Latham first offensive line. I gave out Latham under 14.5 a month ago. But yeah, it's exactas are just addicting. Once you start, it's like the best. The
you guys start to
Neighbors,
cover.
the Cardinals Neighbors on FanDuel. We can get into that later, but those are what I went crazy on.
Yeah, so I have basically any iteration of the 4 quarterbacks and Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't have any Neighbors in there, but I feel like I have, if it's some sort of combination of the 4 quarterbacks going 5 and Harrison, I probably have the ticket, which is kind of, it's we'll see. Makes for an interesting early watch there tomorrow night. We're coming up on that. So, yeah, a lot of good questions. Keep firing them in there too. Connor, you talked about it yesterday in the mock that we went through around the Giants. The Giants, kind of tight-lipped this year, and comparatively with the new, front office. The last couple of years have been a little bit harder than how they had been historically. Some people think that they're a great trade back candidates. Some people think that they want to trade up to get a quarterback. We yesterday mocked Dunze going over Neighbors. Don't have any reporting there, but is there any way that you think that could be played in terms of bets to be made now, or anything with the Giants in general?
Yeah, the Giants are still a little bit of a mystery to me. And I'm not really buying the reports that I know there's been a lot of reports of like, oh, the Giants aren't JJ team. And I know that there's strong reporters saying that, but like, JJ McCarthy spent the most time with the Giants. He went on record saying that, again, it's just like one of those things like, why do we think now that all of a sudden these 3 reporters know what the Giants are going to do and what they want? Like they have had no fucking clue for like 3 years, since Joe Schoen took it off. It's like, they just have no idea, like totally wrong, basically in every direction. So, I don't know. Just to me, it seems like something that, I don't know. I still like JJ to go under 5.5 because I still think that most teams, if they want him, will probably think that the Giants are still a threat. But I mean, maybe not. Again, like also, if you do want JJ McCarthy, of course, the Giants are going to be spilling like they're not a JJ McCarthy team. Again, it's like one of those things that's just like makes a ton of sense. So I don't know. I think that for me, the Giants are still kind of hands off here. Like 6 and 7 have been just like really tough. Like honestly, picks that I've generally avoided just because it's super chalky at 7, and then the Giants could go like 4 different directions or trade up.
Yeah, this question from Brad in the chat. Eric Eager, fan of the show. Eager said earlier that he doesn't see Kwesi moving up to 5 for QB4, maybe to pick 7-ish. That makes zero sense to me. Someone can explain what the difference is. If you've identified quarterback as a need, why are we getting caught up on which QB number that is in the draft? Because each draft is independent of the other one. And what's the real difference? I understand that it costs a little bit more to go to 5 than the 7, but like this seems like, I don't know.
You're playing chicken. I don't know. Just
yeah.
Like,
I think the issue with this and the reporting that's come out is that Arizona and specifically, I think New England are both asking for extra first-round picks at this point in time, and essentially playing hardball, running it up to the clock to see if they can squeeze something extra out of either of these teams that are going to look to move up.
Yeah, I mean, I get, you're in the power position right now to leverage all you can, obviously, until you get put on the clock. So I get why the deals aren't being made yet. Even though historically we've seen some previously, it's okay to be like, I don't know. I have a hard time with like the QB4 and the class thing. It's like, if people have identified these are like top 10 picks, viable starting NFL quarterbacks, like who gives a rip if he's QB7? If we just happen to have a class that has 7 dudes in it, like, why are we have so much ego that we can't move off of the fact that he's QB4? Like you're at pick 11, like you're not in position to get to QB1 or QB2. Like you got to take QB4. And if people have graded him in the sense that he deserves to be inside the top 10, like I don't know.
So for me, and like there's 2 parts to this. Like Jeremiah on that Twitter space yesterday, which was actually great, especially once Aqib Talib hopped off. Or no, that was Devin Witherspoon. Excuse me, Devin Witherspoon hopped off, but. Like his final thought was he thinks that the top 10 is going to be way more chalky than what people are expecting, which to me saying like less trades. Now, I don't know if like a JJ trade up is chalk at this point. That remains to be seen. But off of that, which I guess he said the same thing on PMT podcast as well. But and then there were the tweets last night about, I think it was like Breer, and I forget whoever it was. I think it was Breer, basically saying like JJ is not a Giants guy and like they want Drake May, which if they're not in on JJ, like the whole point of trading up to 4 or 5 was kind of to get in front of the Giants, I guess you could say, which they don't have to do that. And like the Giants trade with the Pats, or they just don't take either. Trading up to 4 or 5 is like not as necessary as it was, I want to say, where like trading into like 7 or 8 could be more realistic if you're not scared of the Giants. And if the Giants make a trade with the Pats, I would say then JJ's gone at 6. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like it's every year it happens. But we've just been assuming JJ is going to go 4 or 5 and a trade is going to happen, which is kind of like the issue with making bets off of assumed trades, because that's the problem. But at the same time, that's why there's been value this whole time, because if it does happen, JJ under should have been like minus infinity.
Yeah, Connor, we were talking last night. Like, it's such a tough spot because it feels like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can go all the way down to, I don't know, 13. And there's been I wouldn't say viable, but like a rumor that makes sense for all of those teams to trade one way or the other makes this like really challenging. And it's not unique into this season. Like that happens all the time, but just how it plays itself out in this cluster at the top half of the first round is, I think, uniquely challenging this year in terms of bets and mocks. So what are some of like the really viable, maybe in the back half here, the top 10 draft day trades that you are expecting to happen, think are more likely to happen than not, or some of the other rumors you've heard that you think just don't make sense to you?
Yeah, I've heard that the Jets are super interested in trading up. So I think that they move up to 7 or 8 to get a Dunza or Neighbors. And I think that's been, pretty steady steam there on that, publicly and privately. So I think that would make a ton of sense for the Jets to move up a couple of picks, just because it probably wouldn't cost them that much, to be honest, too, especially, again, if all the quarterbacks are off the board. If they're not, then it might be a little bit different and someone else might move up in that range. But I think that the Titans, and I think in my final mock, I'll probably be having the Titans and Jets doing a flip there for a Dunza, and then the Titans still landing Joe Alt at 10, 10th overall. So I think that is a pretty interesting one there. I think the Falcons are very liable to trade down if the Titans don't as well. The Bears could trade down. We've talked about it, a couple times, but it's teams are trading up for either a quarterback or for one of those wide receivers. I'm just not really buying the whole trade up for Bowers thing. I mean, maybe they're trading up for an offensive lineman. Daniel Jeremiah did report that like tons of teams were like calling about offensive linemen. So, I mean, that's a potential as well. But again, it would just have to be a small trade, I would say. But it's like those 7, 8, 9 all have guys like on their boards that they could probably get a little bit later. That's what it seems like, at least. So they make the most sense to me, to be honest.
Scott, where are you at in this mix with all these speculative trades?
Yeah, it's really hard to with a lot of the rumors and stuff that are coming in here on the back end. It's hard to parse out all of these players. And I think somebody in the comment section made a smart ass comment that it's by his count there's like 18 people that are going in the top 10. And I think that's kind of accurate. And you have to start kind of deciding who's going to be on the outside looking in. For me, I kind of feel like it's Brock Bowers. I think if you have a chance to go up and get a Dunze, I think one of those teams are going to do it. And then with a lot of the smoke that's been coming in on Byron Murphy to Chicago, it's going to be a Dunze that has to go first in order for, in my opinion, Chicago to get to Byron Murphy. So I think that's where that's really, to me, where things kind of come in, and that kind of pushes Brock Bowers down, whether that be a pick or two to, to 12 to Denver is one of the things we've heard a little bit of steam on. But, it's got to be a Dunze is the player that I think a lot of teams are going to be trading up for.
VR, anything to add to this kind of clusterfuck of trades?
Yeah, you would assume it's a Dunze. Yeah, I mean, it's a Dunze and Neighbors, I guess, if either of those fall. I think that's what everyone's assuming, which is kind of the scary part. But like Latham's the wild card in the top 10, and I would say probably Murphy as well, which I think everyone saw Murphy's odds get destroyed yesterday to go number 9. But no matter the order, like there's 8 guys that we think are just going to go. And then there could be 2 wild cards, whether that's Murphy or Latham. And then it's kind of just like Bowers is either going to the Jets or he's not, which I lean no, but it really just comes down to like the receivers in the end. So yeah, I mean, I think there's just going to be every year there's just less trades than we project. You know, I don't know
The
why.
other issue I'd point out specifically when it comes to Dunze is I've heard at least 3 teams, Indianapolis and Buffalo being 2, that have called up into the top 10 to where they at least know what the price is to trade up to get Odunze. So the interest that I keep hearing all revolves around that one player, and you look at it and it makes the most sense because he's kind of the cutoff of those top 3 where gap begins to form. Then you start to factor in the injury stuff with Brian Thomas Jr. So it makes too much sense for it not to be a Dunze. It's going to be the trade target of any team that moves up there.
Yeah,
Great.
I agree with that. Connor, I'll go back to you with the couple things here to round out. 2 thoughts I want to get. You've been pretty strong in the last week or so about Brock Bowers over, not 10, not Jets. Where are we at there? And then where are we at with the Bears 9 versus all of the latest Byron Murphy news and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, we did bets on Byron Murphy yesterday. I was pretty reluctant, but there's multiple people who told me that, the interest is very real and that it's definitely a possibility if Odunze is off the board. So, yeah, no, I think that it's something that's worth paying attention to. We have a question. Murphy, first defensive player, sounds very doable. Yeah, I mean, if someone trades ahead of the Bears with 8, with the Falcons there and grabs Odunze, and then the Bears take Byron Murphy, I think that's very viable. I still think they could go with Verse. I mean, it just, again, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense on paper for them to take a guy like Byron Murphy. Doesn't really match any of the thresholds they had. Could be just a very well-coordinated smoke screen that's reached some people that I respect. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time it happened. I mean, last year, Jalen Carter was minus 300 to go 5th, close, and they took Devin Witherspoon. So, again, I respect those people as well. Everyone gets 1 or 2 wrong here and there. So, I still think that there's a chance that it's Verse. But right now, looking at Murphy, I don't think that the Jets take Brock Bowers. I'm, fairly dug in there. I do think that there's, the Broncos could consider him at 12. So, that could be worth a look at. I think it's like 12-1 right now. So that's something that's interesting. But yeah, that's Bowers. I still just don't see it at 10.
VR Broncos at 12. It just makes me go back to the conversations we've been having for a couple of months now. QB's 5 and 6. Penix has been on the move. Connor's dug his heels in there as well. I mean, I get the player eval there too. It's just threading the needle to move back and having, Scott's talked about back end of round 1 where a team moves up. Where are we at with Nix? Where are we at with Penix? How do we approach this? Do we leave it alone? Obviously, we're, laying some pretty massive juice in the quarterback 4.5 market.
So we've said this a million times, like this happens every year. And I just refuse to believe the Penix and Nix first round hype. But at the same time, I'm extremely happy to have 0 shares with either of them on their overs because I would never bet the under. I don't see it at 12 or 13. I guess they're a trade back spot, which there was stuff about the Colts or maybe the Eagles wanting to trade up for a corner, which that would be like Quinyon Mitchell yesterday. But if any team is like locked up out of anyone, the Colts never leak anything. Like we don't know what the Colts are going to do ever. And there being a rumor about the Colts trading up, like I just don't buy because we don't know. And I think the Eagles, if they're trading up for an offensive lineman. But at 12 and 13, I just refuse. I have 0 shares involved. I wouldn't recommend it. But Bo Nix's under got slammed this morning. Which like his over, I think, was like minus 300. And now his over is like, I think it's almost like even money. Someone
I think we know who it is.
Yeah, we have a friend of the show who gave us a quote, drop the anvil, Bo Nix to the round 1 play. And when we pressed him a little bit on it, and I don't know, I'm not sold. So I think I would agree with you there.
Value
Yeah.
play.
Yeah, doesn't mean it's not happening, but the supporting evidence was not supporting enough.
Got it.
So yeah. Scott, where are you at with this in terms of, I know your last mock that you had on the site. I know final one will be, tonight, tomorrow morning. Last one you had trade with the Niners, having the Raiders move back into 31 to select Penix. Where are you at? And again, you were early, first mock, I believe, in VR's sheets too, tracking had Knicks 12 to Denver. You were kind of early there too. So where are you at?
So I think it's important for people who read a lot of mock drafts to understand the game that's being played with mock drafts in a sense. A lot of people that put out mock drafts are putting them out specifically for scoring purposes, not necessarily betting purposes. My personal opinion is,
or even accuracy, right? I mean, even though it's scoring for an accuracy competition, it's not necessarily accuracy.
And the way some of these things get scored is you can have a player that gets drafted at 32, but if you had him at 12, that to that team, you'll get scored positive points for that. So I think some people that are putting both Penix and Knicks there at 12 and 13 are kind of playing the scoring game with the mock drafts. I feel like from a GM standpoint, it would be incredibly irresponsible for either the GMs of those two teams to draft either of those players at those ranges. For Denver, I would think that they would probably have one or two players on the boards that they're comfortable with staying at that and picking. And then if either of those couple of players are off the board, I would maybe think that they would move down. You've been hearing a lot of trade rumors, and I can see Knicks going to Denver in a trade down scenario. I think Denver's draft capital, I think it would be, again, irresponsible for them to trade future year picks to move back into the first round to go ahead and trade. And then for the Raiders, I think there is a possibility that they could move in and go ahead and get, Penix there in the first round. But my issue with the Raiders is that it has been so loud and in your face with Penix to the Raiders, and Penix has to go to the Raiders before Seattle is there. And Penix has to go. Like, it's been so loud and in your face that, like, I feel like it's just not true because of how loud and obvious that it's been. And then there's supporting evidence with past drafts. I saw a chart earlier today talking about how rarely, quarterbacks go in the first round after pick 15. So if I don't feel like those two players are going to go ahead and get drafted at 12 or 13, then it's hard for me to feel like they're going to go in the first round. I do think there's a chance, like I said, for Knicks if Denver trades back, but I have my doubts that either player is valued at a first round value. I think Knicks has a higher floor and there's less questions about him, so he has a little bit more of a chance, especially if Denver misses out on those guys. But I think from a value standpoint and setting a board, I think Denver's going to have players there at 12 that they value.
Real quick, Penix rumored to be 6th overall pick and 8th overall pick to the Giants and Falcons. Just like complete nonsense, right? I mean, it's like total garbage. I mean,
Total garbage.
The fact that anyone like with a straight face actually tried to report that is like honestly embarrassing.
Yeah. I mean, if you sit down at a table to play cards and you can't find the mark, you're probably the mark, right? Like, this is just someone's being used to get some information out there. That's I don't know the purpose of the information, but it seems like one of those situations where, you're just trying to create leverage with your spot to get a better trade up. So Patrick in the chat referencing VR's boy, Jarecki dying on the hill. The Cardinals will trade back. I'm there, man. I think the Cardinals are the trade spot still. I'd be very surprised if they are not, but it makes sense why the Chargers too. And I think Connor did a good job laying out why, but I still think the Cardinals are kind of holding all the cards when we get on the clock there on Thursday night. So, shout out.
The one part that I have heard is that the Cardinals are really playing hardball and trying to take this up until the point that they're actually on the clock. They're trying to put the pressure on other teams, but I've heard specifically that Minnesota is willing to basically call their bluff and force them to make the pick. The one part where I think it comes into to consideration is I think that the Giants do have strong feelings towards Drake May. And the same way that the Patriots are set up to allow Drake May a redshirt year, I think the Giants are set up in that same way, and just riding out Danny Dimes for another year and letting Drake May sit and develop. So I think depending upon what happens at 3, kind of reverses that pressure to put it back on Arizona to go ahead and make a deal.
Lots of good questions in the chat. Keep throwing them up. Connor, what do you got for us?
I got the Jarecki quote here. He said, if any mocks don't have the Cardinals trading down, I'll pass. This team is not one player away. So that was the quote we saw there.
Here's the thing, though, and I think shout out to our buddy Ben Solak. So he said this, and I totally agree. Although, again, I want to reiterate, I think that the Cardinals trade down. They have 6 picks in the top 90. Who are like the top? Who's like the second and third best player in the Cardinals, right? Like Paris Johnson, Budda Baker, but then what? It kind of falls off a cliff. And you have 6 of 90. You don't need a bunch of like next kind of tier guys. At a certain point, you have to start to leverage these into blue chippers. So again, I don't think you can't do that by trading down. I think you can still get a couple of blue chippers here. I will have that mocked for sure because I think they still have a ton of equity to be able to manipulate where they want to go if they have dance partners, and it feels like there's enough rumors for teams wanting to go up and down that there are dance partners to be had. So yeah, I mean, I think that they trade, and that's why I'm still holding out hope for our under on JJ.
Yeah. And one thing I'll point out is that you have some mock drafters out there that are putting, Malik Neighbors there ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. I tend to think that for the Cardinals standpoint, that they have both Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. graded very similarly. Even if Neighbors is a little bit ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr., that gives them more incentive to go ahead and trade down, get those picks, and possibly move back up. I think if you have 2 guys like that, I think there's some wiggle room to go ahead and move down. You're not always guaranteed that it's going to happen, but with sitting here hearing the things that we're hearing about Tennessee at 7 and Atlanta at 8 and those teams like that, I think you'll see some mock drafts out there with Neighbors, at 4 to Arizona, but it's not necessarily that they're going to draft Neighbors ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. They might just be mocking him in a projection of Arizona moving back up to get Neighbors.
And yesterday, I was of the opinion that like the Pats should just take Drake May, and like I'm starting to think like JJ is definitely an option at 3. And if the Pats take JJ at 3, then the Cardinals were 100% trading out, in my opinion. Like if Drake is there at 4, my God, back up the trucks, which is exactly why they're going to wait until they're on the clock. So I think, and I do think JJ at 3 as a Pats fan is just awful, but I think it's kind of in the cards right now.
It does feel like a Patriot, though, doesn't he? A little bit,
like,
kind of feels like a Patriot.
He does, and the Cardinals trading with the Giants. It's just in that scenario is just the biggest no-brainer because it can still get theoretically Neighbors at 6 or Marvin instead of having to like trade back up, which it's God, please don't take JJ from a fan perspective. It would just be insane.
One thing I'll point out is that early on in the process, a month ago, you heard rumors that Elliott Wolf was very high on JJ McCarthy, and he's essentially who's supposed to be running the draft. And you're starting to hear those same things come back around, even though everybody's been stuck on Drake May. Another one is Talise Fuaga. He was very much in the mix with the with the Jets very early on in the process, and then it shifted to Fatanu. And now you're hearing late in the process that it's coming back to Fuaga. So some of these draft rumors and things that you hear early on, when they start to pop up late in the process again, I think there's some validity there and some smoke to go ahead and pay attention to.
And Wolf was with the Browns when they took Baker number 1, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is like the evidence that he is not shy in doing, which was like insanely contrarian. I forget who was in that draft. I think everything was like a bust, but no one had Baker going 1 the longest time. And then he went, and that was like he had stones to draft Baker number 1, which would be the same thing with JJ at 3. And that is what makes me nervous.
Just a matter of how much is it Wolves call versus sounds like, the Crafts are heavily involved too. So who actually gets final say? But in terms of like them trading out and not taking a quarterback or trading to a position where they're not taking quarterback, I don't feel that that's a viable option for New England. I think they're going to take a quarterback.
Ownership is like you're taking quarterback and then they can pick who. They're not going to like ownership's not going to be like, I want Drake May or I want JJ McCarthy, and they're going to take him.
Happened last year.
They might. Who knows?
I mean, I felt pretty good about CJ Stroud based on all the reporting that we had, and it seems pretty evident that based off of reporting after the fact and his reactions to watching football games that David Tepper was very heavily involved in pulling the strings on Bryce Young 1 versus CJ Stroud. So
yeah, well,
I mean,
Tepper's
it's not
like
completely unheard of.
Yeah, Tepper's awful, but
He's a 101. Yeah. All right, so let's go through some questions. What do you got, Connor? What do you say?
No, I was going to say, yeah, let's rip through some questions here. We got some good Amarius Mims one. There's been a ton of steam here. So are you buying any of the Mims team? Cecil Lammy reporting Titans have interest in him at 7, worth 50 to 1 lunch money bet to go 7th, 25 to 1 to be second online, under 22.5. VR, I think you had some interest in Mims unders, right? Or were you considering it or not really?
I've been so dialed in on Latham. I mean, top 10 would be crazy.
Yeah, I can't see Mims top 10. That seems a little wild.
Yeah,
I'm one never to tell someone not to bet something in this range because I never want to be the guy that says don't bet a 50 to 1 and then it hits and you're the reason. So like, yeah, have fun with the 50 to 1s. Like 20 to 1 or higher, I will never tell you it's a bad idea.
Yes, under 22.5 feels pretty like a pretty good bet at this point, if that's depending on what you're laying there. So yeah, I mean, top 10 I can't get to, but yeah, keep flying them away. Connor, you want to put some more up?
Yeah. So we got another one. Did you guys hear Jeremiah on Philly radio saying that he thinks Roseman is definitely trades to get an Alabama corner? There's been a ton of hype about them trading up. I think we heard somewhere that it was going to be an offensive lineman, I believe, not a corner. But there has been some, I guess, multiple reporting on being a corner, on it being a corner or an offensive lineman. Noonan, I think. Have you heard anything on that, or is that? I feel like we heard some rumblings of that, right?
Yeah, I think we have a pretty good Philly source that's plugged in. That's I think moved us off of offensive line and into corner a little bit too. But I think that there's a great partnership with the Colts at 15, who could be looking to trade back and add either one of the corners that falls or Brian Thomas Jr. possibly. I think that could make a ton of sense as a trade partner where you don't have to leverage too much to jump from 22 to 15, and the Colts, it's a win for them because they can still get their guy too. So that's something I've been playing around with this morning a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure. That makes sense. All right. Will Byron Murphy be the first player off the board? I think we talked about that. I think definitely possible. I
would rather, so like Byron Murphy, first defensive player. There's two, like you either go top 10, which aren't as great. I mean, they've all just been beaten down. Anything Byron Murphy at this point is like sub 200.
Yeah. You're 24 hours late.
Yeah, you're 24 hours late probably. And first defensive, if the Falcons stay pat, that probably loses. And then him going 9 or top 10, like Odunze or I guess Neighbors is the guy I just can't figure out in terms of like if Odunze's there at 9.
Yeah.
And like I'm assuming, which is part of the reason why it was plus 200 or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, I still think it's a no-brainer for the Falcons to swap with the Jets. But at the same time, if JJ falls, like I bet they'll swap with the Broncos and then go to 11, which means Dunze could be there. But
yeah, and then touching on the Falcons real quick, any more on the D line the Falcons prefer? Clemson Jeff told us not to call him Clemson Jeff. He got offended that we put the school in front of his name, but so we'll just call him Jeff. who also went to Clemson, I believe. He's adamant on Latu. Some other bigger names have mocked Latu there. My bags are packed on Latu, being the Falcons guy. I took Turner overs, Falcons, Latu. So yeah, I mean, that's where I stand currently. I feel like we're all in the same boat there, right?
Yeah, Latu makes the most sense from multiple standpoints of the Falcons having multiple outs. If they stick there and he's the higher player over Dallas Turner, then Latu's the pick. If they trade down, there's still a chance that Latu's going to be there and be the pick. The only other team that I've heard is high on Latu is Denver, kind of at 12, but I would not think that the Falcons would move that far down to be below Denver.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We got an interesting one here. Jordan Morgan, Nick said, can we be nice to my Jordan Morgan over 32.5 bags today, please? I think Jordan Morgan goes in the first round. I think I'm not going to lie, Nick, I'm sorry. But I mean, you guys have any like notes on Morgan? I feel like what is he percentage wise in your sheet now? First round, VR. Let me see.
Yeah, there's multiple teams in the first round that have high grades on Morgan at multiple different positions. Some teams think he can play left tackle. Some teams slot him in as a right tackle, and some teams think that he can be a Pro Bowler as a guard. He's got movement skills. I think his arms aren't the longest, which is some of the things that some teams look for at left tackle. But specifically, I think you could see multiple teams move into that 25 to 26 range and see him go. I think Dallas is an option at 24, all the way down to I really don't see him getting past, say, Baltimore at 30. So I tend to want to play the under heavily on Jordan Morgan being a pick there.
Yeah, and like on that Twitter Spaces thing with Jeremiah yesterday, like at the end, he was kind of like basically like certifying the Commanders to trading back into the first, which he's like, if you just read the tea leaves, like there's nothing more obvious than the Commanders trading back into the first for an offensive lineman or offensive tackle. And he also was preaching they're all just going to go early, which the tackles going early are going to pull a guy like Jordan Morgan into the first. And there've been rumors that the Commanders love Morgan on Walter Football, et cetera, which like whether it's the Ravens or the Commanders trading in, like I think there are scenarios that are growing for him to go in the first. But at the same time, like if guys like Patano or whoever fall, they're going to push him back. And I mean, he's only like 50% in the first on my mocks.
Yeah, it's not that high. Honestly, I thought it was going to be higher. I have all of them in the first round of my mock. And then
I have him 20. I got him 25 to Green Bay. He's like a 9.3 Raz as a tackle. So if Green Bay thinks he's a guard, that Raz is like better. So
and Morgan's a guy who's had multiple visits with multiple teams. So it's not just that he's gotten interest on like top 30 visits. You've had teams meeting with him at the combine and doing private workouts and other things with him. So it's not like it's just one team that we're having an out for. There's multiple teams that he's an out for in the first round.
Yeah, and like I pay attention to like guys that are like projected in the late first having 30 visits with early teams that based off mocks are out of their range, like the Commanders, because they are having interest in trading back into the end of the first. But
sorry, Nick.
Poor Nick. He's conceding mid-show about the Jordan Morgan, just really going through it here in the comments. Yeah.
And Arizona is another team to watch out specifically for Jordan Morgan. So
yeah, could see that too.
Interesting.
All right.
Let's see here. We got another one similar kind of vein. Rosengarten plus 475 first round pick. Would the Niners take him? I had him in my last mock draft. Reach out to some Niners people who are pretty well connected, and they said that would be a massive, massive reach. So don't think. Ooh.
What's it? This last name is Tom. What's the NFL guy? Tom P.
Pelissero.
Jesus.
Pelissero.
Thank you. He had his like surprise first round piece yesterday, and I feel like he hits at least one of these every single year. And he had Junior Colson, Keon Coleman. I think who's the other two? Keon Coleman. God, let me look it up. But like the guys that have gotten first round buzz weren't on that list. Like the Nealons, Rosengarten, which they were like dot connecting with the Rosengarten. I have first round, but just like gets so tight at the end that it's just tough to find spots for these long shots to hit. I think like the best long shots would be like one of the receivers going at the very end, whether it's to the Niners or Chiefs, that we're not expecting.
Leggett, Kingsley, Suamatai. I mean,
Thank you. Yeah,
they're not
those three guys.
really. I mean, they're not really
Suamataia.
even like long shots.
I mean,
whatever.
they were long shots at one point, and man, Leggett is like one guy that, I mean, week ago or 2 weeks ago, McShay was pumping him on the Rosillo pod. Then on the conference call, Jeremiah pumped him like, I want to say like 2 or 3 times. And then, I mean, he's like literally saying that the Panthers are going to draft him in his interviews, which would be 33. Yeah, his over-under was like 41.5. And when that came out, it went down to 33.5, which is basically first-round Panthers or bust. And then he popped up on that list yesterday. So, like, the signals are definitely pointing in the Xavier direction of, like, going first as, like, used to be a long shot, really isn't anymore. That isn't being mocked whatsoever.
The 41.5s were nice because the Panthers sit at 33 and
Right.
39. So, yeah, you had
And, like,
two
I've
out.
just been staring at that over 33.5, where, like, every single signal is telling you no. But at the same time, like, in principle, it's like, come on. Like, do we see him going first? And then that thing came out yesterday, and all these, him saying going to the Panthers, and you just can't. I can't, at least. And then it's probably going to be totally free money. He's going to go in like the 70s. But
Yeah.
Kevin has a note here that Dave Canellis has told 50 players that they could take them at 33. So, yeah.
Draft
Xavier
season.
just
Yeah.
on the horn first.
I mean, that is notable. Like, that's like teams tell agents and players all the time, like, hey, we're taking you. And then they just don't. I mean, usually it's a
Yeah,
little
we
more
hear stories all the
concrete.
time. Teams,
At the
guys are
top,
mad.
like,
Like, yeah.
yeah, I'm more worried about it. If I was to bet the over, I would be more worried of him going the first than like pick 33. Which I think like the Saints drill is a way better bet to go 33 than him. But
Yeah, that makes sense. We got a fun one here. Is there any, Shamil, any bets that you guys made that you regret at this point? For me, it's probably only the Bowers at 12.5 because the number moved against us and everyone just keeps steaming under. So there's some 11.5s out there. 12.5 is now like 2-1. And I think the 12 was a little bit more live than we initially anticipated. So we may make a little move there after the show. But yeah, everything else looks good. I went through it all last night. I think we're in a pretty good spot with basically everything else. VR, anything that you're good, or you just, I mean, absolute money this year?
So if you asked me last week, I would have said I was nervous about the Latham under, which now that's kind of flipped on his face. I would say probably out of all the over-unders, Xavier Worthy's probably the over 29.5 is the one I'm nervous about the most, which is kind of part of the reason why I came in on the Xavier to go before AD Mitchell earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think both can very well hit. But I don't regret that bet. But if I hadn't bet it, I probably wouldn't be betting the over 29 today. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of bets. It's tough.
Yeah, we got some AD Mitchell questions too here about what do we do with him at 27.5? It seems like really wide range of opinions on him because there was obviously the McGinn stuff, and there's been a couple of sharp people have said that he has character issues. I tend to not believe that, but it seems like you bought in and a couple other sharp people have bought in. Where Schefter said he's going to go top half the first round, but that was a month old at this point. So I don't know. Any thoughts here on Mitchell or the 27?
The McGinn thing, I'm not. McGinn, that I'm out on McGinn. And I think it's Mitchell is, for me, betting the over was more about just O-linemen taking up the first round and going a lot earlier than we think. They're going to push guys like the receivers back. And then if Brian Thomas falls, he pushes him back. Where, I mean, I guess there could be value on the under 27.5, quote unquote. I'm not in business really to bet value with the draft. other than like real big long shots. But yeah, I mean, every signal right now is pointing to the over. You could just be wrong. I think he would have to go ahead of Brian Thomas, even Xavier Worthy, to hit that under.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then
But you're
someone
seeing
asked-
like Worthy going 15 right now to the Colts,
yeah,
which like honestly, like guys like him, it wouldn't be shocking because these fast guys just go way earlier than we ever project them to go. But I'd be shocked if like AD Mitchell went 15, but I wouldn't be shocked if Worthy did.
yeah.
sense.
Cool.
And then we got a question: if Coleman goes first round, does that kill the under 6.5 wideouts? Scott, I think it probably does because it means we're probably getting the big four, probably Brian Thomas, and then one. I mean, you need two of still Worthy, AD Mitchell, and Keon Coleman to hit 7. So maybe not. I don't know. I mean, that seems like it just seems like so many.
There's just not any reputable information that I can find towards Keon Coleman going in the first round. I mean, he's a big guy. He didn't test well throughout this entire process. You have other prospects like Xavier Worthy, for example, who has an elite trait in his speed that people are going to fall in love with. I think when it comes to specifically Coleman, he's going to have to be a very specific fit for a very specific team, and I just don't see that happening with some of the other wide receiver outs that they have to go before him.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. It looks like we're getting some mid-show Dallas Turner first defensive player steam here at Bookmaker, which again, for those of you who don't know, Bookmaker generally takes the most action, so people look to it as the one of the sharper books. So that's generally people view it as a more efficient market. -220 Bookmaker. I mean, I don't know. I'm going down from the ship here unless I hear otherwise.
And the one other thing that I would
-220. Holy smokes.
Yeah, the one other thing that I would suggest is that with a lot of these bets, they fluctuated so much over the last couple of weeks. You probably just have sharp guys that are getting positive money on multiple different sides of that bet for first defensive player off the board. So the lines fluctuated so much to where they could have good money on Latu, good money on Turner, and then good money on Murphy, to where when all their bets are combined, they're going to come out positive one way or another.
Yeah, we got some more context here. Yeah, they're back down to -162, taking 5K a pop. Again, that's by far the biggest limits in the space. So, but he's still over 9.5, -181. So, yeah, doesn't seem like anyone knows that the Falcons or someone's taking him, for sure. So
the big
again,
issue with Turner to the Falcons, that the argument that's being made is specifically when you look at how many times those edges have dropped back into coverage. People are projecting that to be a very important trait for the defense that Atlanta is going to be running. And my understanding is that Dallas Turner has something like 70 something more dropbacks into coverage than what Latu or even Verse have. So that's the big thing that has been connecting specifically Dallas Turner to Atlanta recently over a guy like Latu or over a guy like Verse or any of the other defensive players.
Yeah.
Just before we came on, I didn't Whale say that Bookmaker just they just pop stuff back up. So maybe some of this is fairly new to be
they take it
Bookmaker
down
in the last hour. Yeah.
They
haven't been very cooperative with letting people keeping stuff up. And I think people have just been waiting for it to pop up on Bookmaker for the day because they take it down at night.
Unless we have new reporting that I'm missing because we're doing a show.
Yeah, I think the steam is definitely off of someone just waiting for them to pull it up. It's not like something just came out today. I'm guessing
still have an overwhelming amount of mocks that are still kind of lagging with Dallas Turner 8 to Atlanta. So if you're not super plugged in, you haven't been living and dying with some of these moves and news over the last month or so, you're just looking at kind of an aggregate of mocks of late. Dallas Turner 8, Dallas Turner first defensive player off the board is still generally the consensus. So that could be dictating this move.
For sure. And Travis brings up a good point here. Relative to most betting markets, it's still very small. It's still a very liquid market. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, when you're comparing it to $200, I mean, less. DraftKings is, taking $50, $100 a pop. Sometimes FanDuel maybe 200 on a, some depending on what bet you're looking at. So yeah, it's this is way bigger than, anything we're normally looking at.
Albright posted his mock, depending on which Charles Davis is a great mocker. I think his name is Ben Robinson, who runs Grinding the Mocks.
Yeah.
gave him a shout out for being like an elite mocker earlier this morning. And Charles Davis, had a Dunze at 15. And I was just like skimming Albright's mock, which like I'm out on him since the sexting, but he had a Dunze falling as well.
Really? To where?
Which is like Charles Davis was the first mock I've seen him getting outside the top 10. And then Albright has him going 15 as well. I don't know if he's just copying Charles Davis or what, but I mean, yeah, that's wild.
I mean, that is.
I mean, Charles Davis is really the talking point, having a Dunze to 15. And I don't think in the context he said he was like putting him there for a trade. Maybe he was just doing that, but like I don't think Charles Davis would do that. Yeah, I mean, scenarios of a Dunze falling, like getting past the Jets, is wild to me. Where Davis had the Jets taking.
I mean, this is like after the first few. I mean, whatever, you can make whatever case. I mean, the Bears trading down from 9 and then passing on a Dunze again at 14 is just.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming these are like they're
woof.
projecting the Colts to trade up for Dunze, I guess, to put him at 15, because him falling to 15 would be wild. Albright's context is like the Dunze fall stops here, but yeah, wild.
Wow, I'm out on that. All right, yeah.
It would have to be a trade up. I think any team that's going to go ahead and get a Dunze, especially the Colts, who's drafting at 15, they're going to have to move up. And they're one of the teams that have been rumored here recently to be calling around on the Dunze.
Yeah. Anyways,
he's not getting past the Bears at 9. You can't. I don't believe that.
Or Jets at 10. I mean, we know the Jets absolutely love him too. He's like very clear, they love him. So yeah, anyways, we can just disregard 80% of that. Maybe he has a good nugget about Denver, but I don't know. Albright just might be cooked. Let's see here. Did you get any clarity from your Cincy source for first cornerback? Goodberry on Spaces did not commit to O-line, D-line, cornerback. It's notable too. Goodberry, started off draft season with O-line in blood. That was the quote. And then has since slowly capitulated a little bit and like put out some bets of like long shots of cornerback. Again, like Goodberry doesn't work for the team, but he generally is pretty plugged in. VR, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Cincy to take a corner. I don't know if I went over this yesterday, but I think I did. Where like the two texts I got, like basically were like matching each other from a month ago, then a couple days ago, in terms of like them going corner, and it was just too specific for not to both of them to be valid. Nothing since, honestly, I forget who it was. Someone, I was listening to some podcast, or someone was like O-line. I feel like, and it felt like it was in blood for them. But I think it's like very dependent on who's there. So, I mean, I
agree.
I love Cincy corner first, at whatever the odds are, but nothing new to report.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think that makes sense. Last one here. E-Colt over 12.5 Pac-12 plus 170. I believe that includes Bo Nix and Michael Penix. So that's just for me. It just comes down to that. So I'm kind of out on it. But if you think they're going to go, I don't hate it. I guess you're providing yourself more outs there. Cool. Well, I think that's basically it. I think we answered a ton of stuff, and I think that went really well. So obviously VR. It's been real. Appreciate you, joining the crew for draft season here. Maybe we'll do some NBA, some MLB.
Buddy.
NHL shows. Who knows?
Oh, I desperately want to have an NHL show just so we can hear you.
Dude, they're on the same day.
Eastern
The NBA and NHL drafts are on the same day.
What?
NHL can't get out of their own way. Like,
I mean,
they have to.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure NHL draft date.
All the Russian names that VR is going to get to pronounce is going to be just, glorious. Like, it'll be so good.
Yeah.
All right, excuse me. The NHL draft is the day after the NBA. So, like, sick. But still, like, we had a week in between last year. It's all good.
People want one more bet. The people want more plays. They want more picks.
The last bet.
I like the over on SEC players.
Oh, boom. Mic drop. Love it.
Oh, yeah, I bet that a while ago. I'm in on that too.
Yeah, I've been on it already. So
All right, easy.
There's like a
Flux
flat
in.
10 on Caesars that I think is cheap if it's still there. That's what I bet a while ago. I think I like negative CLV on it too. But flat 10 feels like a better bet than laying the juice on over 9.5.
Yeah. Still, you have access to FanDuel. So you can still, this is one of those spots where you could throw in some of those big leg parlays with some spots I feel pretty comfortable around, alt going top 10, Rome going top 10, despite what Albright said. Mims, Cooper DeJean, Newton, Guyton, those are first round picks probably. Maybe not Newton. I don't know. I'm back and forth on Newton all the time. But yeah, I mean, you can build out some pretty nice legs to get plus money on some parlays on FanDuel. So those are
All right.
still in play. Good stuff as always. Appreciate you guys hanging out. Again, jump into the Discord. You want we gave you last play here. Doesn't mean there's not more plays coming out. We have, 28 hours, 29 hours or so. 4for4.com/plans. Promo code VR. Get the betting sub. Come hang out with us all football season. Subscribe to the channel. We'll be back. We do shows every week. We won't have NFL draft to talk about. We'll probably have a Fallout show. We'll continue to do content here every week. We take like a week off a year. So for Connor, Scott, VR, I'm Ryan. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks, everyone.